Caltech. I did a postdoc in chemical biology. And then much like how scientist was frustrated with networking, I was really frustrated with how scientific writing was taught to PhD students and postdocs. And so I switched from academia. I set up my company, Butler Science Communications, and it's basically geared toward on paper. And so that's what I do. I can post the link to my website here so you can find it or ask me any questions at any point later.
That's great. Thanks, Kaycie. Yeah, feel free to put the link in there. I do have them all on a email to send out to everybody afterwards as well. So you'll get all the links of everyone that's been involved on the panel and things like that. But yeah, feel free to interact now.
I can do that.
Yeah, that's great. Yelena, would you like to introduce yourself next?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Yelena O'Reilly. I'm currently an associate lecturer at the University of York, where I also got my PhD. I finished in 2019. I research mainly language, both first language development and subsequent, so second and foreign. I sort of come from a lived experience background because I have bipolar disorder, and generally during my PhD, my mental health took a hit. So I know quite a bit from personal experience about procrastination, time management strategies and all of this that became useful. So as a result, I started a blog talking about my mental talks at my university, various departments about PhD mental health.
That's great. Thank you very much. And finally, Krishana, would you like to go for it?
Sure. So thanks so much for having me here today. I am Krishana Sankar, and I did my PhD at the University of Toronto. So I'm in Toronto, Canada. And my background is in molecular cellular biology, specifically diabetes. I actually am the founder and CEO of GradeWriteSlack, so you'll see the logo here in my virtual background. So GradeWriteSlack, I actually created it 2 years ago, and somewhat similarly to Yelena's story, mental health was one of the reasons why I even created GradeWriteSlack, and that's because I was coming back from a leave of absence. Of course, as you all know, within this group here, or a lot of the participants might know, when we start grad school, we don't necessarily finish with the same people we start with. There isn't a particular cohort. So after going on my leave of absence and returning, I was in major isolation. I had no one to talk to really who I knew any longer. And that created a great need for me to find company to write. So I created GradeWriteSlack, and now we've got over 800 people in there who come to write virtually with each other. But more than anything else, it's a massive support system and network. So a lot of things that people ask for or are looking for when they join is accountability, especially when it comes to writing your thesis. And so as the topic is at hand today, we'll be talking about a lot of strategies around the stressors and dealing with the stressors of thesis writing.
That's great. Thank you very much, all of you, for such brilliant introductions. Every week we always decide, let's let the panel do their own introductions, because you all know your specialities and each other so much better than we can possibly do. And I'm glad you did, because I definitely wouldn't have done you any justice with my own introductions. So I hope for everybody that's attending, you can see if this is the first time you found out who's on the panel and you didn't really look into it, or if you've followed any of them before, or seen their own companies that they've individually set up and the work they've done. We've tried to bring together a real sort of diverse range of perspectives. So both lived experiences, people that are professionals in a certain sector, so obviously science communication, and how everybody can give their own different unique perspectives, tips that have worked for them, because the topics we're talking about, we found from our own experience, are things that are very unique to individuals. Everybody deals with them in different ways. And I'm sure that's why many of you are here, to find out how can things be a little bit better for you, whether it's something you've been through, are going through, or will in the future. So just to give you some structure for the event, I'll be sort of posing a topic question, a discussion question, which our panel can each sort of chime in and give their own opinions or thoughts on. If you have any questions yourself on that topic at any time, feel free to put them in the chat. I'll try and monitor it as best I can. And then we do have some interactive polls as well. So every time the sort of discussion topic comes to an end, I'll put out a poll for you to be able to, it's all anonymous, but for you to give your opinion, and we'll gauge the room, if you will, of what people's thoughts and opinions are. Okay, so the first question that I've sort of got for the panel, feel free to answer in any order you like. what have you found in your own experiences or with the people you work with? What are the common stressors that come with writing, academic writing, thesis writing, whatever it is? What do people really get caught up about, and what is it that affects people? Feel free to just jump in, any of you, whenever you like.
Can I go?
Go for it, go for it.
Okay. So for me personally, and I think for a lot of other people that I speak to, one major stressor is something that makes people very stressed and essentially procrastinate, is that people think that when you come to academic writing, you have to have a whole day for it, you have to pour all your passion into it, it has to be perfect on the first try. And that's, very, very far from the truth. I think I made a significant progress in my writing, and this is when I started seeing a significant decrease in the stress that I was feeling in the relationship to my writing, when I kind of started treating it as a chore rather than a passion. And even if I had 10 minutes a day to dedicate to it, I would just write whatever it was. And bit by bit, I ended up having a chapter, and then I would revise and revise until it was acceptable quality. And I think that just allowed me to have a slightly healthier relationship with my writing, and this decreased my stress, and in return also procrastination, because I used to procrastinate a lot and put off writing because I was so stressed about it.
Yeah, I'd like to follow up on what Yelena said. I think that's probably the number one thing on my list, as well as the list of the well over 800 people within my group, is perfection paralysis. Everyone gets paralyzed thinking this piece of work must be perfect. It's my thesis, but it's also this ginormous document that we have to write. Yeah, of course, it's not a word, but it's a massive document. And so I think a lot of people get bogged down, like Yelena said, where you think you need to have an entire day to just sit and write. But actually, if you think about it, and I think a lot of people, I don't know if you've had this experience before, but if you're doing 4 things, or you have to do 4 things, you're committed to doing 4 things in a day, or 4 meetings, and you're forced to schedule your day. So say, for example, you're forced to put an hour for one meeting, an hour for each meeting, and then an hour for writing. You'll be surprised how much writing you actually get done in that 1 hour versus if you had an entire day that was freely dedicated to writing. So it makes a huge difference. A couple of the things actually that I would say are stressors, I'd say a second one is accountability, and that's a huge one. So one of the things, at least for GradeWriteSlack, that we do is we have dedicated writing slots for people in different time zones, which I've found, and I think the entire group has found, to be extremely helpful. So knowing that you're blocking off, 1.5 to 2 hours, 1 hour, whatever it is on your calendar, and that's dedicated time, either Mondays, Tuesdays, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, whenever you want to do it. That dedicated block of time that is for writing actually helps people a whole lot, and having company to do that helps as well. When I talk about accountability as well, to me, nothing really screams get it done like a deadline. A lot of us really work well when we have a deadline. If you've got a deadline of, say, you have to meet your professor and submit your first draft of your first chapter or something by Friday, you'll, even if it's Thursday night, you're going to be working on it. So, even if you hadn't done it the entire week before Thursday night, you're on it, you're working on it, because Friday you need to show your supervisor something. And so I think accountability in those different ways is another huge stressor that people face when writing as well.
And I'm glad you guys both talked about that, because that's one of the big things I see as well. And so I'll take it a slightly different way. One of the things I see all the time, and I think I come from a background of hard science, and I think it's pretty common in hard science that we're used to having, a set formula for how to do something, a set protocol, a set, these are the steps you have to follow. And then we come into academic writing and it's like, yay, here's a whole thesis, please write it. And one of the biggest reasons I see that people procrastinate is because they come in every day, even if they set a writing time slot, they come to the writing time slot and they sit down at their computer, and it is still this huge, daunting, overwhelming task. And so one of the biggest things I try to get people to do is to break it down into very small tasks with very clear objectives for every single day that you're going to write. Every single day that you go in and you sit down, know exactly, not even what section or what chapter you're going to work on, know what paragraph you're going to work on when you go and you sit down, because procrastination barrier to just sitting down and starting to get it done.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I really like how you all have kind of said the same thing, but in very different ways and from different experiences. My question then, sort of the two things that I think you've picked up on are reaching a deadline and the quality of the work, or your own perception of the quality of the work. Which one have you found that you think is more stressful, either with yourself or people that you've worked on? Is it a bigger problem thinking, I have this deadline, I really need to meet it, and that time pressure? Or is it sort of a bigger problem and more stressful to think that the work you're doing is not of an adequate quality?
I think both, to be honest. It's a cycle, because I'm stressing out about reaching the deadline, but I know the quality of my work is possibly suffering. So
Yeah.
it's a little bit of a feed forward loop. But at the end of the day, to be honest with you, because this document is so massive, and if I did not have that deadline, I know I probably would not have even gotten anything written. So there was this constant feeling of guilt throughout my writing. I just constantly felt guilty that the quality of my work was suffering just because I needed to get it done. But like Yelena mentioned, it's not about perfection. So I had to constantly have this mantra in my head, which my entire group shares, is done is better than perfect. We literally had to say this to each other every day, because otherwise
I
you just
completely
would not
agree
get
with that. And I think that's been kind of the biggest thing for me to learn during my PhD, and then take it into, you know, the research work that I do now. I think I suffered from immense pressure of feeling, you know, whatever I produce, it has to be perfect. And I think my supervisor gave me really a good piece of advice, which was not looking at your PhD as this world-changing piece of work that you're going to create, but rather seeing it as an apprenticeship. You know, you are here to learn. You're here to learn how to be a researcher. You're here to learn how to write your research up, how to properly use academic writing. And I think when I switch that in my head, and when I start seeing it as this opportunity for me to really hone in my skills and perfect them, it really decreased my pressure, because I knew the first draft didn't have to be perfect, and getting criticism or feedback from my supervisor didn't mean that I failed. It just meant that I'm sort of improving and I'm working towards becoming, you know, a better researcher. So I think it's this perfectionism issue at the start that I think it's so crucial for so many PhD students. I think we all feel a tremendous pressure to just, you know, already be great at what we do and, you know, produce this amazing piece of writing, instead of just seeing it as an exercise. Essentially, you know, you're practicing, you're learning, it's an apprenticeship.
Yeah, I have very little to add. You ladies did a great job there.
Yeah, no, I think they're great answers. So
the
go ahead.
Oh, I basically, the small thing I was going to add here is, one thing that helps me a lot is the 80-20 rule, if you guys know about it, that like you get, you know, 80% of the results from 20% of the work, things like that. And it's sort of you have this thing too where, you know, you can put in 80% of this time trying to get to that perfect level, but you're not getting it so much better than you did from that 20% of time that you put in at the beginning. So really pay attention to where you're spending your energy and when you're spending your time. And if you're starting to get to that point of diminishing returns, then maybe it's time to pass this over to another set of eyes to look at, instead of continuing to beat yourself up about it not being perfect.
Can I just add something? I think the reason why I talked about it as an apprenticeship, and I think it's really useful if you manage to sort of get into that mindset in your PhD, because if you look at the whole publishing process as a researcher later, you know, you never produce. I think if you stick to that perfectionist mindset that it has to be perfect on the feedback and revisions from your peers in the academic publishing process. It's going to really hit you hard, and it's going to be really hard to take criticism, which is essentially, it's essential for making our work better, and for having accountability in any sort of research. So I think it's really important to start separating this from yourself and getting used to work that always needs more revision from the start, because it doesn't go away even when you finish your PhD.
Actually, I just wanted to add one more thing, and I think this will resonate, and I was thinking maybe I should say this at the end of this entire panel, but probably not. I want to preface, I think, everything that we say to let everyone know it's a constant psychological battle, right? So we might be here giving tips and tricks and taking you through our journeys, but it doesn't matter what, like, you will take these things and you will implement them slowly, but no, it's a constant struggle. So as much as I learned all of this, I take it with me now in my current position, like Elena was saying, and I actually need to constantly remind myself of that. And while I was writing my thesis, one day would be amazing. I would be using the Pomodoro technique. I would have been super productive, like everything was completely structured. Oh, I finished this paragraph. The very next day, I'm in a slump and I'm like, what's wrong with me? So just know that, every day is different, and try not to beat yourself up about it, because I think the most important thing is to keep going. So even if one day is good, the next day is bad, that's okay. You have your day. Pick yourself.
That's such an important point. I think the academic work, including a PhD, it's so up and down. I mean, if you think about writing even in sciences is something creative. It's something that you are actually creating from your brain. I mean, it's impossible to be switched on every single, even if you have a really good day, it kind of takes it out of you, and then you need a day to recover, and so, yeah, I think it's such an important point. It's up and down, and eventually you get through it.
Yeah, no, I think they're great points, and sort of the thing that I want to come on to now, and sort of how I tried to set up, can you still hear? How I wanted to set up framing the question was by launching a poll for everybody. So if I just launch this now, hopefully you can see that. So it's anonymous for you to give your opinion. Just about half the people voted. Nearly there. We'll give it 5 more seconds just to see if the last 8 people want to vote. Okay, cool. So if I share the results to that poll, you can see, and I think that's sort of, it essentially says exactly what our panel said, which I think is great in terms of a high percentage for both equally, so feeding into that. And again, the quality of the work seems to be that thing that obviously the perfection paralysis that Krishana mentioned, in terms of if we can let go, and people in the chat have been saying this thing, if we can manage to let go of parts that we're not too protective over, and we can get rid of things, then the whole process speeds up and we get there quickly. So perfect. So the next question that I sort of had is more practical focused. So you mentioned that we're here to give tips and tricks, and they don't always work, which I completely appreciate. But in terms of, if thesis writing is one thing that we have in our lives, and then we have all of these other things that are going on academically, socially, etc. How do we balance it? What are your tips for prioritizing things, for being sort of productive? I know that's a word that is so difficult to use, but yeah, what do you have in terms of practical terms, anything that people can take away?
So I can start here quickly. I think the game changer for me, and I discovered this when writing my thesis, was finding that time of the day when I'm actually able to sit down and put words on paper. And that, for me, that was pretty much it. I struggled so hard when I tried to write during normal working hours, anytime basically between like 7 a.m. and 6 p.m. and I was never successful. It was when I figured out that I can write overnight like nothing, that everything changed for me. And so with that, actually, I was able to much more easily balance continuing to work in the lab, because I was completely unproductive at writing during normal lab hours. So I could go into lab and then come home and really just dedicate 4 hours in the evening to sitting down and working on my thesis. And for me, that changed the whole everything.
Yeah, that's a great point. I completely agree with that. Same thing happened to me. And I think I hear this a lot from my colleagues, is that everybody feels like they should do the PhD in a particular way. They feel like they should work 9 to 5. And they very often compare themselves to other people who seem to have it all together, and they seem to be very good at the 9 to 5 thing. Some people are lying. Some of us are fooling ourselves and fooling each other. Some generally really do work really well 9 to 5. For me, it was a huge stumbling block. As I said, I have bipolar. I take a lot of medication. Sometimes I'm quite tired, sedated, and my brain just doesn't switch on. And I suffered so much trying to put myself into that 9 to 5 to figure out that if I continue this way, I'm not going to finish the PhD, because I simply cannot write like, the typical person around me. So I just said, okay, whatever everybody else is doing, I'm just going to put that to one side. And I took a few months to figure out what works for me. And then when I worked out when I'm, like Kaycie said, when I'm best at writing, and I adapted the schedule to myself, I made real.
So like science, an N of 3. So you got an N of 3. I actually didn't expect my fellow panelists to say this, but that's exactly it. So my whole thing is, I think this whole thesis writing, if nowhere else, thesis writing is the place where it forces self-awareness, right? You start to realize, are you really a morning person? Are you really a night person? And what I noticed, and I did this myself, and many people in my group did this as well, is we try to mold and fit ourselves within a specific time to write, just because we thought, oh, this is when I should be writing. And I tried it. I'm not a morning person. I tried to get up. I tried to use everyone else's techniques. I'm like, okay, I'm going to try to write before the sun comes up and when it's quiet inside, and I'll write from 6 to 8, and I'll have the rest of my day to do everything else. Oh, hell no, that just did not work for me, right? I had to be real with myself. I had to be honest with myself. I am a night person, so I had to write for me in the evenings, and that's when I was the most productive. I had the best writing quality. I was fast at writing as well. And so I think it's really important for all of us to sit and read this. Is the comparison game is dangerous. Do not sit there and look at a colleague and say, well, she's writing from 6 to 8 every day and she's so productive, so I should do this. That's the last thing you should do. You need to be self-aware. You have to be honest with yourself, and then you structure your day based on that. One of the other things that I did that helped me, and I'm a huge proponent of this, especially when it comes to maintaining our mental wellness, during it's Zumba or dancing. I'm huge on that. So I needed to take a break, and I would dance, do Zumba, or go for a walk. If you're a person who loves to go running, or you've got your favorite TV show, or whatever it is, although I would definitely suggest getting up, taking breaks, and standing and walking around is really important, because we're always like this when you're writing your thesis. So you're like hunched over, and you're constantly sitting and typing. So I think those are some things that you should implement into your day. But when it comes to the scheduling of your day, just be honest with yourself and schedule your day.
I think I'm gonna kind of repeat what I said before, and I can't stress that enough, because that's been really vital for me. I don't know how much it was going to work for other people, but as I said before, I think when you start your PhD, because it's your piece of work, it's your baby, it's your product, you attach so much heart and soul onto it, and you attach so much of your own self-worth onto it without even realizing it, so that every act of writing becomes really, really high pressure, and and that's a lot of pressure to take, and it creates a lot of anxiety, and then leads into procrastination. And I think for me, I've worked with my PhD, my job, including research, from my core sort of self-worth job. It's a job I'm very passionate about, but that writing, that research doesn't, you know, essentially defined who I am. And once I've removed it from myself, it's become a lot easier to take feedback and to take criticism, and it's been a lot easier to accept that my work is not perfect, and therefore by extension, now when I sit to write, I don't feel such tremendous amount of pressure anymore. Whereas before, you know, it was all personal, it was all so, you know, so important. Whereas now it's my job, it's a passion, I do enjoy it, but equally, you know, it's not the main thing that defines me.
I do want to add something, because I'm seeing quite a bit of chatter in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
Chatter in the chat. So a few people are talking about the vomit method. So I've never heard it called that before, but I do know it's just, for me, I would just say, yeah, it's just about getting words on a page. I know some people are talking about writing sprints, and some people here are talking about having short attention spans and getting distracted. So one of the techniques we use in my group is called the Pomodoro technique. So I don't know if people have heard of it. And I found it, honestly, I've written my entire thesis on Pomodoros. So it's essentially having a chunk of time that's dedicated to writing, followed by a smaller chunk of time that's dedicated to break. So for example, you can go 25 minutes of writing, followed by 5 minutes of a break. And then you can do, for example, 2 hours like that. So 25, 5, 25, 5, etc. And then if you break up your writing like that, it actually helps, because within that 25 minutes, you can give yourself a specific task or aim or goal. And, you know, say you're saying to yourself, okay, I want to get this paragraph done in 25 minutes. And you have a focus for 25 minutes. You're sitting, you're writing for the paragraph, and then you take a 5-minute break, and then you go back again. So I think that's a great technique, and as well as the vomit method, or just getting words on a page.
That's great. Kaycie, do you have anything to add?
Actually, no. I also love the Pomodoro technique. And my comment was going to be what she said at the end there, like make your Pomodoro a very specific task, because that changes the game for me. Like, if you go in with, I have 25 minutes, I'm going to work on this paragraph, like you'll get that paragraph done, and it's very useful.
I think just one more kind of a trick towards the end of your thesis, which helped me. I mean, this depends on how people work, but at the start, me and a lot of my colleagues, we had, you know, each chapter in a separate document, and at one point it kind of starts feeling never ending. And it was really great for me somewhere towards the middle of my PhD when I put it all together, and I kind of started seeing that it actually does add up. You know, there were still parts missing, but it was kind of great to see, you know, the whole structure, and to see the, you know, all of these separate documents, they're adding up into something. So I think if you're sort of mid towards the end of your PhD and you haven't done that, it might be really useful just to give yourself that sort of a boost that you're actually progressing and it's getting somewhere.
I actually do have one more really weird comment that I thought I would share. So if you guys are having a hard time getting words on paper, if you're having a hard time starting your word vomit, or someday you're just really struggling, you're going to hate me when I tell you this, you're going to curse me out when you do it, but it's going to work. Switch your document into Comic Sans. That's it. I'm not kidding. I don't know why it works. It works beautifully. If you're having a hard time putting words on paper, type in Comic Sans. It's going to be annoying, but you'll thank me later.
That's one comment I didn't expect to come out of this, but who knows? Maybe that's the trick that everybody needs. Maybe all our problems will be solved now.
I stole it from the NaNoWriMo, like the novel writing community, and it's so annoying, but it absolutely works. I don't understand it.
I've never tried it, but I might try it now.
Yeah, I'll give it a go.
Highly suggest.
That's great. Okay, so they were really great answers. I think that's like so much better to be able to hear your elaborate explanations and things that you've gone through, personal experiences, rather than on this subject. I think a lot of times you can sort of get very generic advice and you can Google different techniques, but you never really understand what are the pros of them, what are the cons, has it worked, how do I specifically do it? And I think that's why it's great to be able to hear from you all of, these are things I've done, it might not work for you, but this is the way that I've modified it and it has helped me, and different things like that. So I think that's fantastic. So to give another poll to everybody that's listening, a lot of what the practical tips came out was about having a schedule of sorts, obviously different methods and scheduling things. So before this call or in your general writing, do you have a set schedule that you're like, this is what I'm writing this day, and this is what I'm doing. It can be whether you do it day by day. Do you do it this week? This is what I'm writing. Do you lay out the whole project of whatever it is, your academic work, and decide what you're doing? It'd be really interesting to find out if this is something that everybody's doing and we're still struggling. So maybe our scheduling is not as good as it could be or very effective, or if it's an idea that we've just like, no, like scheduling's not even in my view yet. We'll give it another minute or two just for some people to make up their mind. I can see the percentage of people that are voting. I don't want to cut it off too soon in case people are still deciding. Okay, that's great. So I'm going to share the results with you now. So I think that's quite interesting that sort of was the winner, and I think that's what came out of that conversation as well, because we sort of, I think it's a big statement to almost say, yeah, I've got a schedule, I stick to it, and this is exactly what I do, because we give ourselves that accountability then of being like, oh, I'm not on track, things like that. And I think it's perfectly acceptable, or from what you've all said as the experts, of things come up, life gets in the way, writing gets in the way. Sometimes we have a really productive day where we get ahead of schedule. Sometimes it's a bit slower. So I think when you're scheduling, it's really important to sort of be careful and think about, what does this actually mean? What do I want to achieve? And from what you've said, it seems that it's far more effective to say, right, this very short space of time, this is exactly what I'm going to try and complete. If I don't complete it in the time, fine, take a break, just reassess, come back to it again, which I think is great. So moving on to sort of the final portion then, before we get some questions from everybody that's listening. In terms of moving slightly away from the writing side of things and more onto the sort of stress that can come around writing or any work that you've got to do really, and sort of day to day. And a lot of people to differing degrees will have had those stressful situations where your life and your work and things like that are all getting on top of each other. You might have personal things going on as well. Do you have any sort of stress management techniques or things that have really helped you, whether it be with a really sort of a problem that you perceive to be very small and it's something that you got over in sort of a day, or a longer term thing that you've had more of a battle with? How can we manage that stress? Does anyone have any thoughts about that? Quite a big question, I know.
Yeah, this is probably one of my favorite topics to talk about, because stress is just everywhere. And my thesis writing journey was one of the most stressful things in the world, and I will say I am so much happier now. I am over and done with that. But one thing I will say is, when you're in it, it sucks. So when I say the thesis writing process broke me, know that you are not alone. There was actually a time when I thought, is this even worth it? Do I want to continue to go through this? Should I just leave now? And that's actually when I found that if you know to yourself that this is not for you, and this is something I don't subscribe to forcing or pushing someone to finish, you have to know that for yourself. This entire journey is about you and yourself and knowing what you want to do, what is best for you. But if you do know you want to finish, or you're having doubts, I think having that support network ever so often to check in with is so important. So for me, I established that, and that could be your friends, your family, your colleagues, if you're so fortunate to have a great supervisor, and have those check-ins with them and let them know what you're feeling, what you're thinking, and have those conversations. For me, GradeWriteSlack, the group is amazing for that, just because I found it to be the people who know exactly what I'm going through, right? So for example, if I talk to my friends and my family who have never been through it, there might be some generic advice and it doesn't really sit well with me, or it doesn't resonate well with me. But if I'm talking to colleagues who are going through it, or who have gone through it, it resonates so much closer because they know exactly what I've gone through. So I'd say have support networks. Another thing is to take breaks. I'm huge on taking breaks. Take breaks, go for a walk, meet up with your friends, have a movie night, something. But I think it's really important to take those breaks. So many times we get caught up with, okay, I just have to keep writing, that you write yourself out into a burnout. You might, have written so productively for a week, and then you need a break, but your break ends up being a week, to a month to a couple months. And you want to try to avoid that. You want to try to make it a process that is sustainable if you can. For me as well, I like to say get active. I'm a huge proponent of activity. So get up, walk around, exercise, dance, whatever kind of activity you like to do, do it. For me, I did a lot of hiking as well. And the last thing I'll say for this is, although it's a crappy time right now, this toolkit that I had developed while writing my thesis is actually with me now. And this is currently how I deal and manage with all of my stress. Interestingly enough, I figured out and found out and developed so many things while writing my thesis that actually serves me really well now beyond my PhD, that I'm so very grateful for the experience that now I have this toolkit with me. So the moment I get stressed, I immediately know what to do. I go to my network, I take a break, I get active.
Yeah. No, for sure.
Okay. I of course fully
go for it.
Okay, sorry. I of course fully agree with everything she said. I wanted to add two things very briefly. For me, the thing that killed my writing the most, or PhD progress, was procrastination. I had a lot of anxiety around the whole PhD, partly due to perfectionism, partly due to other things. And, my anxiety would get so bad when I started writing that I didn't want to deal with anxiety. And, then I would procrastinate, not do anything for a week. And guess what? My anxiety just got worse. I didn't solve anything. So over the years, I've learned to short circuit that procrastination. Trust me, unless you really need a week off to recharge or a few days off, that's perfectly fine. But if you're doing it because of anxiety and because of fear of your work, nothing's going to change in a week. If anything, it's just going to increase. So if you can kind of work on the and the perfectionism and trying to ignore it and just get through it, because if you procrastinate, it really isn't going to help. It really, really isn't. And the second thing I wanted to say, so Krishana was talking about taking breaks. And I think it's really important here, and I know Colin was saying, the stress of life. One of the things that I really talk a lot about on my blog is what happens with your PhD when life happens along the way. I had a pretty much a nightmare PhD journey, in the sense that my mental health took a hit, but unfortunately my husband had to go to chemotherapy. So those few years of my PhD and his PhD were one of the most stressful in my life. I think what's really, really important is to also figure out when you need a break from your PhD to focus on other things in your life. And, as a result, I took a leave of absence twice to deal with my personal life. And I think that was really important, because I simply realized that at this point in my life, I simply cannot juggle my life and the PhD at the same time. And it was the healthiest thing for me to do, to actually know when to take a slightly longer break, a couple of months from my PhD, without feeling guilty. Because at least in the UK, at least in my university, I live with a lot of personal problems. I would advise, yes, take shorter breaks, but also assess if at any point you need to take a slightly longer break.
Okay, and then thank you also so much for sharing your story, because you've been through so much that it's actually, iron to the fire, you've really been there. And the one thing I just want to point out as well, because this is something that crippled me a little bit, was that I had it in my head, all of these things about, I need to remember to exercise. I need to remember to try to eat healthy. I need to remember to try to get sleep. And, we've talked a lot about the guilt, but one thing that really killed me was the guilt around not being able to always do all of that self-care. And so, yes, it is important to try to do those things as much as you can, but there are going to be some points of your life. And for me, the thesis was definitely one of them, where no matter how much I tried, I was never actually going to achieve a very high level of that self-care. And so for me now, in hindsight, I never got to this point during my own PhD, but I help people with it now. In hindsight, it was okay. I needed to cut myself a little bit more slack there. It was okay if I ordered takeout food one more night for dinner. That wasn't the end of the world. It was okay if I skipped a run one day because something else was coming up. Like, I needed to let myself not feel guilty about that stuff as well. And also, one more thing I just want to remind everybody of here, Krishana, sorry, mentioned it a little bit, but I just want to say very explicitly, this will end. It will end. It's not going to always be like this. It's not going to always feel like this. I work with PhD students all the time who are so stressed about their thesis. They're always thinking they're going to be beating themselves up for the quality of it. And I can promise you, every single one, as soon as they turn it in, they don't care anymore. It's done. It's over. They're fine with it. They're happy with it. Like, so it will end. It will be fine. And
I just
there will
wanted,
be another side.
yeah, yeah. I
second
wanted to
that
share
so
the story.
much.
So I actually, to Yelena's point, she spoke about taking 2 leaves of absence. Now, I don't know if anyone else has had that experience. I myself did that, and I will tell you, I had the most crushing guilt and embarrassment and everything under the sun that you can feel about taking those leaves of absences. But the truth behind it is, you know what works for you. You do what you need to do for yourself. Ain't nobody gonna come do it for you, so you have to do it for yourself, right? And there's nothing embarrassing about it. A lot of us suffer, but we suffer in silence because of the stigma. So don't believe just because you've taken some leave of absence and you think someone else is, on the fast track, you have no idea what's really going on in their life, right? So like the comparison game can really get to you. Also, to what Kaycie said, it is important. I know, yes, we were talking about taking these breaks and making sure you take care of yourself, but being able to be kind to yourself, I would say, is one of the most important things during this process. Just be kind to yourself. I saw a few people in the chat saying, they took some time off, they took breaks, and they would feel guilty. I beg of you, do not feel guilty. If you need it, you take it. I think there was something else I wanted to add, but I forget. But anyway, yeah, just basically similar things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate that, like, you can't run on empty. It doesn't work. You need breaks. And with any other job, you would think you deserve breaks, because we need that to function. There's no reason to feel guilty, honestly. It's like the air mask, oxygen mask on an aeroplane. You gotta put it on before you help others and before continue with anything else. It's just necessary. It's for survival.
Yeah, that's great. I think, again, like, I'm speechless is the wrong word, but I think your insights are really great. There's not that much to add in terms of your unique perspectives on what stress is, the different forms it can come in, and sort of, this is actually a practical way that I can deal with it. And I think one really big bit of advice that you've all given is that don't feel that you have to deal with it straight away. Sometimes time is the thing that it might need to take to almost deal with itself, and being able to say to yourself, actually, it's okay if I take this time, is something that is really important. And it links to another event that we've got coming up in a few weeks about imposter syndrome. And again, it's the idea that an academic or this sort of ideal researcher is something that's put out there quite a lot of, this is how you should be, these are the things that we do. Nobody knows why they're done, but it's just, you're supposed to do it. You're supposed to be finding it easy and things like that. And to go back to what Yelena said about treating your PhD almost like an apprentice, like you're learning, I think that's something that, again, comes into the idea of stress. You're not expected to be this one individual that can go through anything and nothing gets in the way of your work, because that's the most important thing ever. Sometimes there is life, there is your own happiness and things that are just a little bit important that you need to think about as well. So yeah, I think that's great, and thank you all for your responses. Just as we're coming up to the time, I just wondered if anybody has any questions. That I can see Krishana's answered a few questions, which is absolutely brilliant, in the chat. If anyone's got anything that they'd like to either contribute themselves, feel free to, you can unmute yourself and say it. If you have a question that you want me to pose to the panel, then now's your time to sort of put that in the chat box. So I'll give a couple of minutes just for you to write any questions that you have on that one. Just while people are sending in their questions, in terms of your involvement, I know obviously you all are in slightly different spaces. Where's the best place for people to get in touch with you, for them to sort of potentially want to work with you, to gain more advice from you? Sort of, where can people find you, and what are you up to at the moment? That's to anybody on the panel.
Yeah, so for me, feel free to reach out to me on Twitter. My handle is just at my name, so at Krishana Sankar, and also join GradeWriteSlack if you're not already in there, because we do have a large community, but I tell you, that is the community that got me through my thesis. You know, it's just a community of academic trainees from all around the world. It's such a positive, supportive space. I really needed it. And I was so happy that I managed to create a space that maintained that positivity, because there's so much toxicity in academia. Coming, even sometimes now that I'm done writing and I'm working, I sometimes come back to this space just for the positive vibes. You know, everyone's helping each other, they're writing together, they're keeping each other accountable. We do like check-ins every Wednesday. I try to do mental health check-ins where I ask people how they're doing, and I try to be as open and honest about what I'm going through so that I can create that environment of openness. And I also try my best to keep it a judgment-free zone. So, you know, we share our hardships, and then we sort of crowdsource support, and then we sort of resources or advice. So yes, please feel free to reach out through Twitter, both for GradeWriteSlack and myself personally.
For me, you can find me also at my Twitter handle is @ButlerKaycie. He'll send the link. I'll also send the link to my website on there if that helps, because from my website you can find links to things like Facebook or LinkedIn or something if a different platform is working better for you. But yeah, you can, from my website, you can also send me an email or contact me, you know, Twitter DMs anytime, whatever you guys need. So no worries.
Yeah, I'm not as established as my two other panelists. I'm sort of more in a personal capacity, but I'm happy to interact with people via Twitter. And I also, as I said, I have a blog, but it mainly centers sort of around mental health and kind of improving academia as a space and employer in general to allow people to have better mental health.
Actually, Kaycie brought up a really good point. So of course, in the name of accessibility and the fact that we all are on different platforms, I also have a link tree that I posted in the chat. So you can get me in other places as well, but I just tend to.
That's great. Yeah, thank you all so much for being here, for giving up your time. And like, it's no secret from our part that none of you have been paid to do this or anything. You've given up your own time because you're willing to help others and give your advice, and that I know comes from a personal standpoint from all of you. And likewise, everybody that's attended, you've given up your time because you wanted to come and learn about something to maybe gain some insights. We are trying to constantly improve these events to find out what topics is it that people really want to find out, what do they want to learn about, what kind of guests do you want to see. So please do, if you haven't already, I've posted the link to the Twitter account for scientists, or mention it on the platform, but do get in touch either personally or send us a tweet with what you thought about the event and give us that feedback, because we're over the point of taking everything personally. We need that criticism and that constructive feedback to be able to improve these events and make them even better. But if you do have any outright positives to say and tweet us to say it was a great event, that will also make my Friday even better. So that would be great too. But yeah, thank you very much to our panel. Like, I can't thank you enough for giving it your time and coming. And I hope that everybody enjoyed this event. We'll wrap it up just because we're getting to 6 o'clock. Well, in the UK on a Friday now. So that's just for selfish reasons of me, pretty much. So yeah, thank you very much, everybody. You will all be receiving an email at some point over the weekend, if not the start of next week, with the links to all of our panelists and a little sort of summary of key points to take away and things that I've been jotting down that I've thought are really good. So if you don't get that, get in touch with me on the Scientist Twitter account and I'll make sure that does work its way to you. But it should arrive at the email you used to sign up for this event. Fingers crossed. I've probably jinxed myself now, but hopefully that works. So yeah, thank you very much, everybody. Have a great evening, afternoon, morning, wherever you are. And yeah, hopefully see you at another event. Cheers, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.